Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Howard Garrett, and I am the Endorsement Committee Chair for the Capital Stonewall Democrats. Tonight, we welcome you to joining us on our second Candidates Forum, co-hosting with the DC Young Democrats along with Ward 2 Democrats. Before we begin, we would like to thank all of our candidates for joining us tonight to share your issues and concerns regarding LGBTQ issues and young adult issues. Before we begin, we do want to go over a couple house rules. There will be 2 minutes per each question, along with back and forth for one time if need be. We do appreciate you for joining us tonight. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat for any participation. We will have questions from the audience. Before we start, we will have a welcome by the Ward 2 Vice Chair, and then we will turn it over to Maxine to begin our forum.
Good evening, everyone. I am so excited. Campaign season always gets me excited. I am Monica Roche, the Vice Chair of the Ward 2 Democrats. And I'm so glad to be able to partner tonight for this forum so we can hear from the candidates and see why they are the best candidate to vote for. Just one quick reminder, the Democratic Party's major fundraiser is the Kennedy's King Dinner, which is this Friday at Nats Park. And we invite you all to join. You can get tickets on the DC Democratic Party website. So please come join. We have some great speakers, a lot of fun activities, and we hope to see you on Friday. Thanks so much, Howard.
Thank you. Maxine?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. As Howard said, my name is Maxine Davis, and I am the Vice President of DC Young Democrats, and I will be your moderator for tonight. I am ready to get started, so let's dive in. We are here tonight. Well, the first part tonight is going to be for our at-large council member. And we are here tonight with Council Member Robert White, who is up for re-election. And I will start by offering 2 minutes for an introduction, and then we will move into specific questions.
Thank you so much, Maxine, and I want to thank the Capital Stonewall Democrats for hosting this very important forum. I want to thank and recognize my other fellow Dems in here. We have, not just locally, but nationally, a lot of work to do. There's a lot on the line. So I look forward to working with you all, not just on this election, but other elections across the country, especially the presidential election. I'm at-large council member Robert White. I'm in my second term as your at-large council member. I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian. I am the husband of a woman who has no equal, father of 2 little girls, Madison and Monroe, who absolutely like my life. And I am someone who grew up in a family here in the district in the 80s and 90s in a time that was tough, in a family situation that was tough, but frankly, very similar to a lot of folks who live and grew up in the city. Issues of housing costs, incarceration, the quality of education in our schools. Those were the issues that my family grappled with. Now, I was very lucky after a very long streak where I did incredibly poorly in school to get things together late in high school. I went from being a failing student in the 10th grade to being an international scholar, a college graduate, and a barred attorney. What I have done is use my life experiences to produce results on the council. Everything from the biggest expansion of early childhood education in the country to creating the first bill in the country to pass, extending voting rights to all incarcerated people, full reform of the DC Public Housing Authority. I've created a free master's in social work program for our residents to address our deepest issues. I'm working on creating the biggest expansion we've ever seen in DC for vocational education and a citywide mentoring network for our young people. I have gone to bat and gone to battle for working people and people with low incomes in the district. Just within the past 6 months, I have gone to bat and won to protect emergency rental assistance and SNAP.
Councilmember White, that's time. Thank you so much.
Robert is here, so we can add him. He can do his statement now.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Rodney Grant. We have just gotten started with our introductions. You have 2 minutes to get started. To introduce yourself.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry for my difficulties getting inside of here tonight, but I want to thank you guys for having this very important forum. My name is Rodney Red Grant. I'm a DC native and a DC community leader. I'm a father of 3 beautiful daughters and a grandfather of 2 beautiful granddaughters that call me Papa. I'm a husband of a retired police officer who just so happened to be a Hall of Fame basketball star. People always ask me, why should they vote for me? I tell them because I'm already doing the work that a council member should be doing. I'm already the chair of public relations to bring back vocational education to Washington, D.C. schools, making it the strongest vocational system in America. Also, we started programs like Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras, where we teach young people filmmaking from thought to theater. They make the films from beginning to end. And we also started Beyond Your Block, where we take young people off their block and show them different things. We're taking them to the White House, the African American Museum, Commanders games, and we're going to continue to take them different places. People always ask me why they should vote for me, because I'm reachable, I'm accessible, I'm a very engaging individual. You know, my opponent has been on the council for the last 7 years. He keeps pointing fingers at how bad this city is and blaming everybody else for it. This is the year for accountability because he's a part of the problem. We can hear all the stories about how people are getting the job done, but we can see with our own eyes the inequities and inequalities that are going on in our community. We have to have a supplant direction when it comes to working with the council, and I bring that approach to making our community a better community. I'm Rodney Red Grant, and on June 4th, I'm hoping that you can vote for me for DC's next at-large council. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for your introductions. As I stated before, I will have 4 specific questions for you all to answer. You will have 2 minutes each to respond. If one person addresses specifically another person, I will give the opportunity for you to respond to that in 1 minute. If there are no questions, we will get started. Okay. So our first question tonight. Where do you stand in providing robust protections and comprehensive support systems for transgender individuals seeking refuge in Washington, D.C., particularly those fleeing from states that have enacted discriminatory policies targeting their healthcare access and overall well-being, thereby ensuring that our city remains a beacon of inclusivity and safety for all? I would like to hear from Rodney first.
Thank you so much. Great question. You know, we have to protect all of our citizens' rights in Washington, D.C. A lot of people come to Washington, D.C. just to make sure that their rights are protected. I'm going to be that type of council member to make sure laws are in place that protects our LGBTQ community and definitely our homeless community, because we have a lot of young homeless people in Washington, D.C., and we got to protect them. We got to give them safe havens and safe places to live. You know, my position on situations when it comes to our citizens in Washington, D.C. is all about protecting them first. It's about D.C. first. And when we start thinking like that, we're going to make sure our city comes back to where it needs to be. Our young people deserve to be protected. People in the LGBTQ community deserve to be protected, and all the rights of Washington, D.C. residents and citizens have to be protected. And I'm that type of guy that's going to make sure that they're protected at all times.
Thank you. Robert, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for that question. As the rest of the country becomes more divided and less hospitable to people, the District of Columbia has to continue to step up to be a haven to welcome people. That's something that I have some experience with. When the Supreme Court acted to overturn Roe v. Wade, I stepped up with bills to protect people seeking abortions and those who provide those abortions, making sure that we were a safe haven, understanding that there is discrimination, that when people come here, particularly transgender people, they need somewhere to live, and they are disproportionately homeless. That is why I have funded LGBTQ housing vouchers for youth and for seniors. Once people get here and get housed, we want them to make sure they can work. That's why I passed and funded the DC government transgender and non-binary employment study to study DC government employment practices with respect to hiring and retention so that we can learn what we're doing well and what we need to do better to make sure that people who are transgender or non-binary have a place to work that is hospitable and welcoming and affirming. That is why I passed and helped fund the LGBTQ Health Data Collection Act to make sure we understood where there were disparities and discrepancies in health access for transgender people. So this is work that I believe in firmly. This is a place where I've worked with many of you all to get things done. And this is a place that I will continue to work with you.
Thank you for your responses. I'll move on to my next question. If elected, how will you implement comprehensive strategies to not only improve, but also expand health and social care services, specifically tailored to the unique needs and challenges faced by LGBT youth in our city, ensuring they have access to inclusive, culturally competent, and affirming support systems? Robert, I would like to hear from you first. You have 2 minutes.
The most important strategy is for DC government to provide the funding, but step out of the way. There are organizations that have been doing this work. One organization I've been lucky to work with over the years is HIPS. It's Whitman Walker. It's many organizations that are doing this work and know how to do this work, but we need to support them with funding. Where the DC government can play a role is making sure we understand disparities in access, where we can make sure we have enough enforcement, where programs or services are not affirming or don't have the proper reach, but we don't need to be implementing these programs. So my strategy is make sure that these programs are accessible and make sure these programs are funded.
Thank you. Rodney, you have 2 minutes.
Also often, our young people get caught in these streets and have no one to look out for them. They go through psychological situations, they go through homelessness, and people turn a blind eye. And they do it in a way that they act like they care. You know, we got to get back to love, care, and respect when it comes to Washington, D.C. again, and when it comes to our communities again. And when we are forgetting about any community in Washington, D.C., we need to be checking ourselves. And my LGBTQ brothers and sisters, they know the dedication that I have brought to the table when it comes to working side by side with them. And I'm going to continue to do so. But I want to make sure they're protected legally by laws. There's so many laws that don't protect the LGBTQ community, and we have to have people in office that are going to fight for the laws to protect our LGBTQ community. And that's me. I'm going to continue to fight for the LGBT community. I'm going to continue to put funds in place for LGBT community when I become DC City Council. And I'm going to continue to make sure that they have a proper place that they can feel safe in our environment in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Our next question. What concrete actions have you taken to support LGBTQ residents in Washington, D.C., and how do you intend to build upon those efforts, if elected, outlining specific policy initiatives and community engagement strategies to advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, equity, and inclusion in our city? I would like to hear from Rodney first.
Thank you so much. We definitely have to go deep into our school system also. You know, a lot of young people are being bullied in the school system because they are a part of the LGBTQ community. And we want to put laws in place to protect that also, and making sure our kids can go to school and not feel bullied. This is all about making sure we protect the rights of our citizens in Washington, D.C., and give them the proper equity that they deserve so they can make great decisions and they can go on and be great leaders in our community. You know, no person in Washington, D.C. is different than any other person in Washington, D.C. And any inequities in our city is the wrong inequities. You know, I want to make sure that we continue to push for juveniles to be protected. I want to make sure that we continue to make sure it's equity in our city, and we can make sure that we smile more in our city. That's what's wrong with our city. It's too much arguing going on within our governments. It's too many beefs with our councils and our mayor, and we need people in place that's going to bring a sense of sensibility and accountability to this forefront.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Robert, you have 2 minutes.
So most importantly, all of government must work for all people, and that means LGBTQ plus people and our youth. But more specifically on the question, what have I done? I put funding into the LGBTQ Community Center. We need to get more funding, but I believe that the government needed to step up. There are things that I do that are important, even if they're ceremonial. I passed the Pride Plates bill that'll get us funding for Capital Pride. I've done the Black Pride ceremonial every year, although I'm going to hand that to one of my colleagues on the council going forward. Every year I do the ceremonial and I attend the vigil for Transgender Day of Remembrance. On more substantive things, what I've mentioned, the district government transgender non-binary employment study. This is work we have to do if we are going to be real about getting more LGBTQ people employed in our government and setting a model for the private sector. That is why I have funded housing vouchers specifically for LGBTQ youth and specifically for LGBTQ seniors. That is why I passed and helped fund the LGBTQ Health Data Collection Act. So again, I've been doing this work. We have worked together to really push the district to step up to make sure we are working for all people. And again, that is work that I'm going to continue to be on the front lines of.
Thank you both so much for your thoughtful responses. We are going to move into some audience questions. If you give me 1 second so I can read through them. So there's a question in the chat that states, what support will you provide to LGBTQ seniors? Let's start with Robert.
Absolutely. The biggest support that comes to mind is housing. That is one of the biggest issues. There is a disparity in homelessness for the LGBTQ community. But one of the reasons that I'm so serious and consistent about funding vouchers for LGBTQ seniors is because there was an article in the Washington Post. It's been a number of years now, but it touched me in a deep way. And it was written about the issue of LGBTQ seniors who grew up in a time where, frankly, the world was even less accepting than it is now. And often as they aged and became more vulnerable, they didn't have kids to take care of them. Their families have rejected them long ago. And too many of them were finding themselves unable to find housing or in housing or care situations that were not affirming and in some cases abusive. That is why I have done the work that I've done around housing for LGBTQ seniors.
Thank you. Rodney?
Thank you so much. Well, we definitely got to make sure the food disparities for our seniors are done right. You know, I do a lot of these senior homes every Wednesday where we play bingo. We give back food from Whole Foods, and a lot of our seniors are telling me the same things, that they don't have enough food. They don't have the proper food. So we got to make sure our seniors are eating correctly. We got to make sure that they are getting the right nourishment inside of their bodies, because this is a very important time for them. And we got to make sure that they do have the proper housing. You know, a lot of these senior buildings are not in the best condition as they should be. And we got to make sure that that our seniors are living properly. You know, I went into one senior home recently and the sink was off. And this is a place where, it's supposed that we pay, the city pays for. I've been to a lot of different places in Washington, D.C., and the way that they've been treating seniors inside of these homes, we need to really check people. And I want to put laws in place that make people accountable for how they treat our seniors out here. They are most vulnerable, so we need to take care of them the most. And it doesn't matter if you're in the LGBTQ community or any community. When it comes to our seniors, we're going to make sure that they're taken care of. So when Rodney Red Grants becomes the next at-large member, I will make sure that it's boots on the ground, and we make sure our seniors in all communities, especially the LGBTQ community, is taken care of.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I have time for one more question. Howard? Yeah, okay. So this was another question in the chat that was specifically asked to both of you in regards to the second to last question I just asked. To ask you to be more specific about which laws you will write and support to get LGBTQ plus people safety in DC. Rodney, let's start with you.
All right, thank you. Great question. Safety should be everyone's first priority in Washington, D.C. The city that we live in right now is probably at its most unsafe in years. And we got to make sure we get back to safety for the whole community of Washington, D.C. We got young people not safe. We got LGBTQ not safe. And we got our seniors not safe. And our veterans. And those are the 4 vulnerable individuals that need to be safe at all times. So I want to make sure we put legislation in place that's going to commit to keeping our LGBTQ community safe, but also our whole city safe. But we got to get these guns off the street. We got to make sure that people are in the right state of mind. They got to have the right psychological help. And, we can do it as a city. This city has a lot of resources. We just got to be able to have the proper communication with one another and hold people accountable in the city of Washington, D.C. And I'm going to make sure that we continue to do so. My background might not be in law, but I have a common sense about myself. I'm a pragmatic Democrat. So we got to start thinking in the common sense way. And right now, our city is going to hell in a handbasket, and we got to make sure we change it.
Thank you. Robert?
I appreciate that question. So look, safety is in many folds. It means physical safety. So I have supported, will continue to support and write if necessary any laws that strengthen our hate crime laws, because we are not going to tolerate anyone being targeted in our city, particularly for being members, for being LGBTQ. We are going to make sure that there is fair and equitable, accessible and affirming access to care. In that respect, it often means funding the organizations that do that well. Safety means having a place to live so you're not out on the street. That is why I work with some in this group for an LGBTQ housing summit. It's why I'm working with my colleagues now to restore funding for access to justice to prevent evictions. It's why I've funded housing vouchers for our LGBTQ seniors and LGBTQ youth. It's why I dedicate portions of my hearings to organizations that serve primarily LGBTQ youth to make sure they can keep their doors open and keep doing their work. Safety means having a job so that you are not finding yourself unhoused. That is where the district government transgender and non-binary employment study comes in. So again, I want to make sure I'm clear about the specificity. I've been on this council working, getting things done to protect our community in a number of ways. And again, I'm going to keep doing that work.
Thank you both for your responses tonight. They were thoughtful, and we were able to learn much more about your thoughts on some of the issues we have addressed today. Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope that you are able to join the Capitol walls Capital Stonewall Democrats on May 21st at their endorsement party at the Bridge at 7 p.m. We also hope that you'll be able to join the Young Dems at their social function this year on May 30th. Thank you both, and we will
Thank you
meet
for having me.
with our Ward 4 candidates in just a moment.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I think we are ready to get started with our Ward 4 candidates.
Yeah, if our Ward 4 candidates could come on camera, that would be great. And I can spotlight.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is our second round of candidates tonight. So thank you again for joining us. We are going to get started in just a quick second. I'm going to give you a rundown of what this is going to look like. You all will have 2 minutes for introductions, and then we will move into a set of questions that I have prepared for you all, and then we will move into some audience questions. So I will start with Paul Johnson. If you could do your introduction, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's good to be with you all. Appreciate the opportunity. I believe it's important to, can you all hear me? It's fine. I think it's important to show up, and I'm glad to be here. I'm running to represent Ward 4 on the DC Council because I think that leadership is in order. I think that we have some serious challenges before us in the district and in Ward 4. And I think paying attention to jobs, how we create jobs, how we create a pipeline to jobs for all constituents in our ward, and particularly those marginalized in our ward, need better ideas and more of a consistent effort to make that the goal of families staying in the ward and in the district a reality, and being able to participate in the amenities that are here and resources that they can use. I think that that also involves education, appropriate education, in order to create a life for themselves here in the district. And I think that vocational education, apprenticeship, special education needs, health supports are important with respect to how we look at our educational system. Lastly, I would say that safety. Things are not safe in the ward right now, or safe in the district, despite comments otherwise. Residents are looking for clear, bold leadership about accountability and right-sizing the resources and the appropriate resources for achieving public safety in Ward 4. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Janice, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Thank you and good evening to the Capital Stonewall Dems for convening this discussion and for having us here, and all the partner Democrat organizations who are also co-hosting here tonight. For those who have not met, my name is Janice Lewis George. I am the current council member for Ward 4. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, a proud DC public school graduate, a proud graduate of Howard University School of Law. I am a former assistant attorney general, and I grew up here in Ward 4. And so it's an honor to serve the place where I have called home my entire life. And it's an honor to represent the community where so many of my family members and stay. And that's a part of the work that I do and why I approach the work with such fierceness. Some of the biggest accomplishments in my first term have been passing the Homes and Hearts Amendment to end homelessness for hundreds of families and increase pay for early childhood educators, while also putting money in the pockets of working families every day through our earned income tax credit. Fighting to give SNAP a raise so that our families who are most in need can get the funding they need, and our seniors have the food and nutrition they need. Fighting against rent hikes. When the district was going to raise our rents to a 12% rent hike, knowing that rent is too high, I was there to fight for working families and say, that is not something that we can do or will displace more resident. I've introduced new innovations for housing in my Green New Deal for social housing. I believe housing has to be has to be something we tackle as a district, and all tools are needed here. I use evidence-based solutions to safety, including intensive interventions in the areas of Ward 4 most impacted by violence, like Petworth and Kennedy Street. My work is about bringing resources to our communities that benefits our LGBTQ plus neighbors who are disproportionately impacted by the issues we face, but it also benefits every person of our community and every vulnerable neighbor who needs the support of this great city. So I look forward to talking to you more tonight about the support that I've put in and the support I plan to do in my next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for your introductions. We will dive into our questions now. You will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions as well. Some of our young residents seek mental health services, counseling, affirmative, and housing services through LGBTQIA plus resource centers. What are your plans to expand these programs to ensure they are accessible to those who need them? I would like to start with Janice first, please.
Thank you. Yes, I was just talking to my council colleague, Councilmember Parker. He sent out a letter and talked about some of the ways in which we're going to support and ensure we have funding to do that. In last April, my office and HIPS co-hosted community-led conversations with neighbors on public health-based and community-led strategies. I also work through my committee. I am the chair of Facilities and Family Services to support LGBTQ youth who are in the neglect system, who are graduating out of the neglect system, and ensuring that our agency provides them the housing vouchers that they need and the support they need as well. And so I'm committed to continuing to ensure the funding is in place to make sure that these programs continue to happen and we can continue to support our young people.
Thank you. Paul, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question.
I believe in supports for members of the LGBTQIA who are in need of supports, whether it's housing, whether it's mental health supports, whether it's basic community supports. And I think that I would continue on the council in that vein, the work I've done as a community advocate and being embedded and in tune to the needs of the community in our schools. During the course of working with our high schools like Roosevelt and our high schools in our middle schools in Ward 4 like McFarland, and our charter schools like DC Bilingual, to engage with students and with youth to understand what their needs are and to work with district agencies to deliver upon those needs, and where there's room to improve or to enforce, to continue in that vein. A lot of my work with behavioral health and interdicting on in Petworth, on Georgia Avenue, around hotspots like Georgia and Taylor, and in between alleys, and dealing with my constituents as ANC with concerns about youth being unhoused. Sometimes there's overlap with members in the LGBTQIA community, and I have interacted with those communities and heard about their concerns and lack of being heard and lack of supports, and I'm committed to redressing some of those gaps in services and in being heard and seen. And my point to you is that it stems from knowing your community and being on the ground.
Thank you for your responses. My next question. Public safety is a major concern within our city, and we are witnessing sectors of our city calling for more arrests of our youth to address juvenile crime. What are your thoughts on the Secure DC bill, and do you think it's effective enough to address juvenile crime? I would like to hear from Janice first.
Thank you. You know, public safety in our city is the number one concern that we're seeing, especially with our young people, at younger ages committing some of the most egregious crimes. Before entering the council, I served as a prosecutor in the juvenile section, both in Philadelphia and here in the District of Columbia. And here's what I found when we focused on young people and we focused on why they were entering the juvenile justice system and getting to the core of that. We were able to see how we are able to impact our young people. So Secure DC, I don't think wasn't necessarily a bill focused on our young people. Bills that are focused on young people right now, we have in the city right now. My legislation to address conflict resolution for all of our students, our out-of-time school program, universal out-of-time school program legislation to make sure we have out-of-time school program, the work we've done to even just today on truancy. As chair of facilities and family services, we co-started what we call the warm line. What we found is that young people who are entering and their families have not been able to get support unless they enter the juvenile justice system or they enter the neglect system. What we rolled out last October was the 211, not 311, not 911, but 211. And you can call that number. You will get a school-based mental health professional that comes from our Child Family Services Agency, who's now stationed at the OUC. And that means that you'll be able to get supports. Families will be able to get supports now, not just when their child is in the criminal justice system and not just when they're in the neglect system, but now young people can get services and supports through our collaboratives throughout the city. And within the first 5 months of this being open, we got over 587 phone calls to the 211 line. And what those calls surrounded was housing instability, educational instability, mental health instability, and needing those supports. And so that's the focus that we need to have as we look at our young people and making them better citizens for the long haul.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to go?
Thank you. The question was about the Secure DC bill.
Yes.
Okay. I support the Secure DC omnibus bill. There certainly is a crime crisis. I was the victim of it myself a few days ago, being carjacked while out campaigning. And as I talk with neighbors across Ward 4, they share similar stories and don't much appreciate being made to feel as if the reality of more brazen behaviors aren't before us. And I think in order to change a problem or a crisis, we have to be clear-eyed and very straightforward about it before we can address it. And I think that law enforcement is an institution that we need to work with, and we need to work with intelligently to make it better and to make it accountable. I know this as being a young man myself, navigating in the city about being safe. And I think that I don't have any tolerance for a lack of protection of constitutional rights or abuse. But I think that we need to work with all the stakeholders to ensure safety. We don't need to have amendments that weaken public safety in Ward 4. And we also need to look at the comprehensive social determinants that contribute to public safety. That comes with being involved in your community and understanding the needs. It comes with zoning and the types of units and housing that we have. It comes with engagement of young people. It comes with mediating, which I am and have done. I've been on the board of Community Mediation DC. I've mediated in DC jail. And it comes with working with behavioral health, walking the beat. And I think that these are all conflicts of fact. May I finish my sentence like my colleague was allowed to do? May I just finish my sentence, please? And I think that it's a comprehensive view towards public safety, which you need to be engaged in to achieve public safety with young people. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question. What concrete actions have you taken to support LGBTQ residents in Washington, D.C., and how do you intend to build upon these efforts if elected, outlining specific policy initiatives and community engagement strategies to advance LGBTQ rights, equity, and inclusion in our city? I would like to hear from Paul first.
The role on council is legislative and oversight and performance oversight. I think that robust oversight of the agencies that have jurisdiction over LGBTQIA youth and families should be protected. I think that the funding levels for these agencies should be protected. I think that having a open pipeline and relationship with non-governmental advocacy organizations for these communities are important. And it's something that I am committed to doing on the council representing Ward 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So some work that we have done to support, obviously, the expansion of the office here, the executive office. The work that I've done has been through my work as family services chair, ensuring that all housing vouchers were utilized a year before. They were not going out the door. I made sure that any of our youth who wanted to obtain those would be able to do so. Funding the community programs that work. We have so many community organizations, from Whitman Walker to HIPS DC, to so many who know how to do the work, who are culturally trained in doing the work, who are community centered in doing the work. And so for me, it's about getting the organizations who are community centered, who understand that to get the funding support they need. And so ensuring that they are funded and are able to do the work that they need to do is important, and I think has been key and something that I'm continuing to support. We were able to do the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women Amendment Act of 2022, which includes protection for people who are non-binary, and continuing to do legislation that supports our continued community in that regard. For me, it's about giving people the resources they need, making sure they have good jobs with good wages, making sure that they have affordable housing, making sure they have the culturally sensitive health supports that they need, no matter what they're struggling with, whether it's a physical ailment or whether it's mental health support, and continuing to do that work to fund the programs that are here in our community already doing that work. And so through my work in family services, I've been able to also support home health aides and supporting people who are on the ground every single day, making the difference. And I think that's the critical work that is important, just bringing the resources to those who need it most.
Thank you so much. So that I would like to open up now to audience questions. If there's someone in the audience who has a question, please drop it in the chat and I will be reading from off of there. We do have one in the chat. Where do the candidates fall on supporting the platform of the DC LGBTQ+ Budget Coalition? I would like to start with Paul.
Thank you for that question. I looking forward to working with this coalition to better understand their needs and policy goals. So I'm better able to speak specifically about their particular platform, but I can assure you that I'm committed to equality. I'm committed to fairness. I'm committed to empathy, and I'm committed to seeking out and working with all of the stakeholders in Ward 4 to achieve fairness in the needs for our residents and neighbors. So I'm looking forward to working with the coalition to understand specifically what the asks are, but I'm committed in principle to equality, to fairness, towards culturally competent representatives, to having a staff that has pipelines in relation to these communities, so that all of this feedback bubbles up into my office, and we can do right by our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice?
So first and foremost, I'm supportive of the platform. A few things I want to know. I've been talking about housing a lot, but I just think it's so important. I continue to support dedicated permanent supportive housing vouchers for our LGBTQ plus community, especially our youth. I think unless we have that dedicated support to make sure they have accessible and inclusive environments of housing, then we are not doing our best to support them. And so I continue to support the housing needs of our young people and making sure those are there. I support a community center because I think it's important to have a community center, LGBTQIA community center that can be a place and space for the community to be able to gather, to advocate, to experience joy, and all of the things that a community center can bring, programming and et cetera. So want to make sure we get that support as it relates to work and continuing to ensure that we have gender diverse workforce programs. I think that's huge. And the other thing is the mobile mental health units, which has been critical, and the work that we're doing right now around mental health is not enough. And so I think having mobile mental health units goes a long way because we get to bring mental health to the community, and not have to sort of have people go through the process of trying to find a provider, which is one of the hardest processes. It can take months and even years to find the provider and find the support that you need, which I think is huge. And so, I'm a supporter of the of the platform, and am working with my colleagues now to ensure that it's funded in this fiscal year 2025 budget. And it's been great to work with my colleagues in doing that, and I look forward to seeing where all that we're able to accomplish in this budget that we're working on right now.
Thank you so much. Monica Roche, would you like to come off mute to ask your question?
Sure. Councilmember Lewis kind of touched on it, but I was wondering specifically, have anyone thought of grant funding for the establishment of youth community programming, or like financial support for whether evenings or after school or in these community buildings? I know that often when I've done community work, like with my sorority, it's often very hard to find locations to even have community outreach. And I just was wondering if anyone's thought of like grant funding to help support, pay for like a location, resources, speakers, things like that. And there maybe be a competitive grant that would support LGBTQ youth residents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that there are grants through the executive's office, and they offer grants, but I'm not sure the specifics of what those grants are, but I do think it's something worth having a conversation about. I also think that we should, utilize our DPR centers, utilize our senior centers, utilize the spaces and places we have as a District of Columbia And it should be something where people don't have to go through an arduous permit process, especially when we're servicing a community that needs that support too. But I think bringing in speakers, sort of like DC Public Library does a great job of having programming, culturally competent programming across the board. And so I think it would be a great idea to have some of those grants go out, and for us to be able to have agencies partner with the work that's happening, to be able to make more programming more effective and efficient for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to respond to that question?
I would, thank you. It's an important question. I think that a common theme for me is that it stems from constituent service, engagement with all of your community and all the sectors of your community. And I think that I know that I've done that work in Ward 4 in my capacity as an ANC and as a community advocate. I have observed that in Petworth, for example, there's a lot of resources for young children. Like I have a 7-year-old, my wife and I have a 7-year-old, but as children age into becoming preteens and young adults, there's less amenities or resources for them in the Petworth area that makes sense for them, which is why I've worked with Petworth Playground and the employees, the DPR employees in Petworth Playground, to make sure that there are appropriate activities from the community to have offerings for youth in the Petworth area. I've worked with, and I've worked on the budget to advocate for those resources as well. And I've also encouraged the changing demographics of families coming into Petworth to work together with the workers at DPR in Petworth, many of whom, actually all of whom, who are Black and actually can't afford to live in the city. So it's important to understand what the needs are in the community for youth and being able to pull parties together to make sure that there's offerings and grants and access to those grants to deliver those services to youth.
Thank you.
I have time for one more question, and there was one put in the chat. Do candidates support opening safe drug testing centers to reduce opioid overdoses in the district? Paul, I'd like to hear from you first.
Yes, and I'm a community advocate. You know, I'm not a politician. I'm not a practiced politician. I'm a parent and a community member that cares. Yes, I support it. And yes, I've worked very closely with the Department of Behavioral Health and the prevention centers. I've put together public awareness campaigns for opioid overdose. I've pulled in partners like the National Institutions of Health, the Volunteers of America on Kennedy Street. I've personally myself gone on distributions in various sections of the district, Bladensburg Road, including hotspot areas within Ward 4. I've been on monthly calls with respect to the data and how it presents in Ward 4, and I've worked very closely with the Department of Behavioral Health. And one of the things that causes me great consternation is that most of the most affected population of overdoses in Ward 4 are Black seniors, actually, who are overdosing in their homes. And it's not talked about enough. The next are youth in our schools and in our high schools. And from my working relationships with administrators and leaders in the school, with behavioral health practitioners, and with partners in the health space, and also non-governmental actors like HIPS. I've been very active and very involved in these endeavors and pursuits on the ground, and that's the style of my leadership, and it's something that I will continue to do, and it would inform my hiring, and it would inform my approach to legislation into oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, you know, the opioid crisis has taken too many lives here in DC, and it hasn't gotten the focused attention or the necessary and the right interventions. Partner organizations like HIPS help keep Ward 4 clean and safe, including operating vital needle collection programs. My constituent services team has extensive background in supporting community issues of this nature because of doing that work. You know, I went to a safe consumption site, went to visit On Point Center in Harlem in 2022. And the model of care and compassion and dignity I saw that day embodies sort of what a patient-centered approach to harm reduction could be in the district. I saw people coming in and finding a safe place. There were EMT on site. There were support staff on site. There was even just dry cleaning and a safe place to sleep, food. There was even sort of a massage therapist and aromatherapy and just a full nature of support. It treated the opioid crisis like the health crisis it is, and it treated people with respect and dignity. We have moved towards trying to do some of that in the district, but we are not sort of fully at a safe consumption site point. And so I would love to see us reach that level. Given the stigma and risk surrounding drug use, I would also like us prioritizing the district engaging in substantial community building groundwork with neighbors and businesses who live and operate near any sort of forthcoming harm reduction and safe consumption sites. I think that's important. And when they did that in Harlem, it made a difference. They just to see the difference in their park and in their surrounding community, you know, made people even more sort of adamant that this is something that's successful for everybody, not just those who are struggling at the time.
That is it for our questions tonight. Thank you both so much for your thoughtful responses and for joining us this evening. I do hope you all will be able to join Capital Stonewall Democrats endorsement party at the bridge on May 21st at 7 p.m. And then also the DC Young Democratic Candidates meet and greet on May 30th at 6:30 at Law Society. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
We are going to pause for a few moments and allow for our next candidates to arrive and turn cameras on, and we'll get started shortly.
Maxine, ready when you are.
We can get started. Next up, we have U.S. Shadow Representative. Let's give a warm welcome to our candidates, candidates. Representative Oye, I have never said your last name out loud before.
Owolewa, but you did good.
Owolewa, there we go. Thank you so much for your support. And Linda Gray. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make their opening statement, and then we will move into questions, which you will also have 2 minutes to address. So first off, we will hear from Linda for your introductory statement.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Linda Gray, and I am a candidate for US Representative. I am a fifth-generation Washingtonian. I reside in Ward 4. I am a former biology teacher, assistant principal, and now a retired principal from DCPS. I've been involved in DC politics my entire adult life. I currently serve as the vice chair of the DC Democratic Party. I'm an at-large member, a member of the DNC, and within the DNC, I'm a member of the Black Caucus, the Women's Caucus. I'm a member of the Voter Protection Committee, and I am vice chair of the Eastern Region Caucus of the DNC, which is from DC to Maine, plus Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. In 1973, we were granted home rule. That's 50 plus years of being autonomous. And in 2020, we turned everything blue virtually, but lost home rule by only 4 Senate votes. In 2022, we lost control of the House, which isn't something that's uncommon. But what we need to do now is flip the House again, because they have threatened to take home rule. And I do believe they're very serious. So if we can flip the House and keep control of the Senate and re-elect Joe Biden, we have another shot at this. But if for some reason we cannot, and we don't complete the mission as we would like to, life for us could be something unlike any of us have ever known. We will hit rock bottom and we'll have to start all over again. And for that reason, for my concern, for my fear, and even my disgust at the thought that we could possibly lose home rule, I am running for this position.
Thank you. Oh yeah, you have 2 minutes for your introduction.
Thank you so much, Maxine, and greetings to you all here at Capital Stonewalls. My name is Oye Owolewa. I'm elected healthcare worker. I'm a former ANC commissioner, Ward 8 resident, and your US representative. In this role, we fight for DC statehood, and I've been proud to do that for the past 3 years. We've gone to other states to pass DC statehood resolutions. We have also gone worldwide to discuss what's going on here in DC. In addition to fighting for DC statehood, we launched initiatives here in DC that have been left open by not being a state. Number one, our criminal justice system is not controlled by us. Many of our returning citizens have problems clearing their records compared to our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia. So in this office, we create something called the Expungement Clinic, where we help returning citizens clear their records, we help them get free legal aid, and help them get second chance employment opportunities. Many of these people in these rooms are LGBTQ+. We've also helped minority and local business owners learn how to get contracts, learn how to get grants, learn how to get certifications so they can stay in the city and be enriched with all the resources that we sometimes miss from the federal government. Last but not least, we go into classrooms, get kids interested in careers that can keep them here in DC. Now, specifically for the LGBTQ+ community, we have used our service and our words to amplify what this role can be and what it can do. As a healthcare worker, I collaborate with Smile and and Planned Parenthood to have an op-ed in the Washington Blade that discussed the need to pass the Equality Act, to codify Roe v. Wade, to make sure that trans teens all across this country are able to get the healthcare services that they need. In this role, we've been able to maximize our opportunities because of the people on this call. This is not my office, this is our office. And I'm hopefully seeking a third consecutive endorsement from the Stonewall Dems so we can continue this work together. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move into questions now. Republicans have openly shared how they plan on rolling back protections for women, LGBTQIA+, and people of color in Project 2025. If they win in November, they will begin implementing these plans as soon as January of 2025. How would you use your elected position to protect impacted communities, not only here in DC, but also those across the US who are increasingly facing legislative attacks and threats of violence? I would like to hear from Oye first.
Yes, thank you for that question. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the op-ed that I put out. Here in DC, we're blessed with a high percentage of LGBTQ+. About 10 to 15% of adults have self-identified as such. And many of us in this call are already either Native Washingtonians or come from other parts of this country. Rather than just celebrate the diversity we have here, I believe that we do have a responsibility to care for those outside of DC, our brothers and sisters who do not have governors who respect their autonomy of their bodies or respect their pronouns. I think it's important for us to not only talk the talk, but walk it too. Go to other states, make sure their residents understand the importance of DC statehood and how voting electorates from District of Columbia can actually improve their lives, even if their governor is passing laws to impact them. Supporting the Equality Act. A couple of years ago, the Stonewall Dems and I participated in something called the Equality Panel, where we brought LGBTQ plus leaders and healthcare workers to talk about the importance of expanding the Civil Rights Act to include folks of different orientations, folks from all genders, to make sure that whatever happens in one community affects us all. We're also indebted to people of the community. If you look at the Black Lives Matter, if you look at certain social justice issues, they are led by folks in the LGBTQ plus community. So it's not only important for us to support them, but also recognize their importance and influence, not only in the nation, some national issues, but also in some of these offices. I'm pleased to say that we have LGBTQ plus members of this office from the beginning of my term as US representative, and it really adds to the depth of what we can do and what DC can bring to the United States.
Thank you. Linda?
I think what I would do is continue what I've been doing. And for the past 3 or 4 years, one of the things that we found out is that the average person really doesn't know what it means not to be a state. And I think it's not unfair, because if you do live in a state, there's no reason for you to think how we're impacted so differently. Once we started explaining what it is not to be a state, people started getting it and could relate to what our problems are. So all across this country, in all 50 states, we have 100% support for DC statehood. I would like to take that energy from state parties to the congressional offices, because that is where the lobbying has to occur. It has to occur on the Hill. You go to the places where you need to lobby for the things that you want. And so that support that we get from state parties, it's a connect the dots kind of thing to help us get to congressional offices to get some of the results that we need to have.
Thank you both for your responses. Our next question. There are countless recent examples of how the Republican Party continues to use the district and our residents as bargaining chip on the Hill, and at great detriment to everyone who lives here. Trump has declared that he will make attacking home rule and rolling back our rights, funding, and freedoms a top priority if he wins in November. How would you use your role to ensure this doesn't happen? What are you doing right now to ensure this doesn't happen? Linda, you're up first.
Right now, again, doing exactly what I'm doing, working with state parties and to get to congressional offices. But the other thing that you have to do is to be there, to go on the Hill. I was recently on the Hill March 7th for the last oversight hearing, 2 days after the council had signed off on Secure DC, and to see Byron Donald from Florida to throw it out with some alternative crime bill. Congresswoman Luna, also from Florida, to come in and throw out our Clean Car Act. One of the things that was missing that day, that room was not filled with Democrats. And any time that they pour on an attack towards us, we need to be on the Hill. I mean, the shadow delegation needs to be there, but we also need to be sounding the alert to get all Democrats there. And I believe when they see us, there's always strength in numbers to know that we're serious. I don't think that you had to almost be there to see the posture that they took with us, because there were so few of us. I mean, it was facial gestures, but that fight is real and it is serious, and it is the role of the US representative to sound the alarm, get the rooms full of Democrats, to mobilize and to be there to counterattack these attacks that we're going to have. And they are very serious.
Thank you. Oye, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you for that question. all means necessary, going to Congress, going to the communities, going outside the district. But it can't just be a party thing. You got to reach across the aisle. I've been pleased to go to West Virginia, which is a red state, and get Republicans to understand the importance of DC statehood. But I didn't lead on how it impacts me and my life in the district. I lean on what impacts them. They talked about the water crisis in Wyoming County. They talked about food insecurity in Boone County. And I talked about how that parallels with some of the things that happens here in DC. And I even went on Joe Manchin's favorite radio station and called him out on air, because it's important to not only speak to the red-leaning people, but also their listeners. Right now, they're making statehood about a Republican and Democrat issue. What we're not thinking about is how we can get Republican voters to say, you know what, that makes sense what's going on in DC. Taxation without representation is completely incorrect. And it's really what drove this country to succeed from Britain. So when you think about it as a fundamental equality action versus a political situation, we're able to touch more people. When we lean on folks on what they care about first, whether it's here in DC, whether it's criminal justice issues, whether it's LGBTQ plus issues, whether it's about healthcare needs when it comes to a needle exchange program that was overturned by Congress, or a criminal justice bill that was just overturned by Congress again last year, it really makes it make more sense than just voting representation in DC. Now, voting representation is a huge, huge issue, but it's not the end all be all. We have other impacts of DC that's not covered by not being a state, whether it's our control of our National Guard, whether it's our final say over our laws, whether it's our control over our budget. That is just as important. We need to make sure every DC resident and people outside of DC understand that statehood is about how we take care of ourselves and impact the country.
Thank you. My next question. If elected, you will be the voice of district residents on the Hill. How will you collect the community's voices to ensure you are accurately and appropriately expressing our needs to our visiting lawmakers on the Hill and in the White House? How will you ensure our voices are reflected in the laws and funding decisions Congress makes daily on our behalf? Oye?
Absolutely, we've been able to do that. Last year, I had the privilege and honor of being the very first statehood delegation member to appear on a panel for CBC, Congressional Black Caucus. This oftentimes doesn't happen to people in this role, but they respect the role, the work that I've done in this office, not only speak on how to galvanize young people, but bring the voice of DC onto the stage in DC. In addition, we also lobby for legislation that impacts district residents in addition to the DC statehood bill. Just the other day, I was in Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan's office talking about the Access to AEDs bill, which talks about defibrillators and life-saving mechanisms that doesn't have a DC cutout. 3 years ago, the CARES Act labeled DC as a territory and gave us half of the funding to combat COVID-19 compared to Maryland, Virginia, Texas, and all have you. They compare us to Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico is surrounded by water. We're surrounded by Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So it's really important to make sure these laws and the financial way the money is being dispersed impacts us just as we get as much money as each and every other state. We have to make sure we get the money we deserve. We have to make sure we're able to work and live without congressional interference. We have to make sure that we're able to control our lives and make sure that our lawmakers in Congress aren't able to impact our own lives the way they came and do so in their own communities. When we have former Speaker of the House McCarthy talk about the safety of DC, whereas his hometown of Bakersfield is more dangerous than it is in DC. We have to make sure that they're not allowing to use Black and DC as scapegoats for everything that they can't do in their own areas. And I've been blessed to be able to, be the face of that fight and make sure we're bringing that to a national and international platform.
Thank you. Linda?
Thank you. I think if I understood your question was, how would I take DC's voice and make sure DC's voices were heard on the Hill? I think, quite frankly, between the work of our delegate to Congress, a shadow delegation, our legislators on the council, there is already an understanding that there is one voice for statehood. People understand perfectly well that We contribute to this nation like any other state, yet we do not have voting rights. They understand that not having statehood is both immoral and it is unconstitutional. And so to take the voice or specific voices means going to different constituencies, like senior citizens who enjoy very much the benefits from the Office of Aging. We probably have the best one in the DMV, and for them to understand what services they could lose if we lose home rule. So I want senior citizens to be heard. I want young people to be heard. I want working people to be heard. I want mothers to be heard who are losing their children to senseless gun violence. But they all understand the importance of statehood, and having statehood will give us the ability to make certain decisions that are going to help our citizens enact our own laws, spend our money the way that we see fit.
Thank you. To the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask of these candidates, please put them in the chat. It is now Q&A time. There is one in the chat already, and so I will read it. Not for just statehood, there are countless federal policies and budget issues that members of Congress and others on the Hill vote on every day. How do we connect our citizens with reps on the Hill who are designing these programs and voting on our laws? Linda, I would like to hear from you first.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure, it's also in the chat if it's easier for you to read it. There are countless federal policies and budget issues that members of Congress and others on the Hill vote on every day. How do we connect our citizens with reps on the Hill who are designing these programs and voting on our lives?
We make sure that our citizenry knows exactly which laws they're talking about in oversight hearings, which things they are trying to overturn, and attend those oversight hearings and connect with our own citizenry to keep them abreast of what's going on. I think it is so important, the aggressiveness, and I do say aggressiveness because it's more than being assertive, of how they overturn our laws just because they can. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just being mean-spirited and targeting us because they can. But the best way that we handle that is to make sure that the citizens of the district know what they're doing and what our course of action should be when we have to counteract or to react to what they're doing.
Thank you. Oh yeah, same question to you, 2 minutes.
Yes, this speaks on the testament of who I am as a person. As a former ANC commissioner, I live in Ward 8. There's a huge disconnect sometimes between the people and what's happening. And one thing I realized is that DC is one of the most diverse cities in America. And when I say diversity, it's not just off of race or background, it's also based off of learning habits and how people receive information. So some people are able to go to the Hill. Some people are able to go to the council. Some people are able to collect newsletters and get the information they need. But oftentimes, some other people need the information to come to them. So what got me into becoming a US representative was going to the Capitol to do some door knocking, talking about statehood. I realized I was one of the few Black people, even fewer east of the river residents in those rooms. So I brought Congress back to my ANC. I brought the Congresswoman Norton to speak on federal issues, the lawmaking process, civic engagement, and it really increased the community's know-how about this process and increased my interest in being in this type of role. Nowadays, I'm actually bringing folks from Hill offices into classrooms, teaching kids about the process, teaching kids about how they can get involved, teaching them how to testify. We're talking about 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th graders that now know how to testify. Going to State Board of Education means going to the council, possibly even going to Congress and speaking on things that they care about. We start them early. We engage DC residents to become the next level and being tomorrow's leaders, because now being 7, 8, 9, 15 years old, there are huge ramifications on who's going to become the next president or who's going to win in November. Having someone like Joe Biden in office allows us to cancel student debt. Having conversations and teaching young people how to testify makes our country a much better place. So bringing those folks from Capitol Hill to our communities is one really good way of bringing this system together and improving our outcomes.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. And that's it for me. So thank you all. Thank you both so much for joining us today and providing those thoughtful responses to our questions. We do hope to see you at two upcoming events that our co-hosts are hosting. The first one is the endorsement party with the Capital Stonewall Democrats on May 21st at 7 p.m. at the Bridge. And the second one is the DC Young Democrats candidate meet and greet on May 30th at 6:30 at Law Society. We hope to see you at both of those events, and thank you so much again for coming out tonight.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you all so much for sticking out with me tonight. This has been quite the round of candidates forums that we are having tonight. We're going to keep moving to our next candidate. We will hear from our Ward 8 candidate for council. If I believe Salim Adolfo, if you could, here we go. Your screen's black. Is it just me? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Give me 1 second. Okay. We will start off with 2 minutes of introductions, and then I will go into a series of questions for you.
Okay.
Just for you and I talking today. Thank you so much for joining us. You have 2 minutes for your introduction.
All right. My name is Salim Adolfo. I currently serve as the chairperson of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8C. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I also worked at the Department of Homeland Security. I've also worked with ACC, Anacostia Coordinating Council, doing tenant advocacy. Also worked alongside Fair Budget Coalition, as well as Empower DC. I look at our community as one that is ripe for change. And as an advisory neighborhood commissioner, I help to bring in quite a few different changes to the infrastructure of our community, help to get roads repaved, speed bumps around many of the schools that we had in our community. Most recently, I worked with Ballou High School and Whitman Walker Health to make sure that we can get testing done on National HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. As a commissioner, I've worked with a lot of the development that's happened on St. Elizabeth's campus, working to make sure that we can get the hospital that's being built on time completed, whether it's making sure that we can get work done on the weekends and on holidays to expedite the process, as well as with the Whitman Walker Health Clinic. I've also worked with a variety of community-based organizations to help students get to college, taking them on HBCU tours, as well as creating STEM programming at the Berry Farm Rec Center. I've done quite a few projects with some of the homeless shelters we have across the city, making sure that the residents who are there can get access to fresh food, clothing, medical supplies, and personal hygiene products. Have also conducted voter registration drives in conjunction with that. Testified on quite a few different hearings and bills that are dedicated to our community, especially east of the river, making sure that those voices are heard. Finally, I would like to say that I am someone who appreciates this opportunity. I want to say thank you to all of the members of the Stonewall Democrats, Capital Stonewall Democrats.
Thank you. Okay, so up for our first question. Some of our young residents seek mental health counseling, affirmative, and housing services through LGBTQIA resource centers. What are your plans to expand these programs to ensure they are accessible to those who need them?
Well, from what I'm told, that Ward 8 has the highest number of LGBTQ residents, especially among youth. So I want to make sure that there is dedicated funding to this line item in the budget, but I will also look at how can we see what we already have and build upon that and expand that. When we see some of the housing that we have, I do know that there are some locations that are kept private for safety reasons in the ward, but making sure that we can have some of those voices who are in leadership with them at the table as we plan out what the budget can look like for our ward.
Thank you. Housing's becoming too expensive and out of reach for young DC residents. What will you do as a council member to address the housing crisis and ensure it is deeply affordable for young residents?
So you can start with HPAP at the age of 18. So I think it should be something that we look at in terms of high school education to talk to young people about what does home ownership look like. The goal is to be older than a lot longer than you'll be younger. So we should be preparing young people in high school to be homeowners. Something else that is also important is the amount of public housing that we do have in the city that is either vacant or blighted. So then we should be working to restore a lot of that housing so that that can be an opportunity for some of our younger people. Then we also have a plethora of units throughout this ward that we call it self-eviction. They're been neglected by property owners. So we need to make sure that the Department of Buildings, along with the Attorney General, are holding these property owners accountable so that they can repair some of these buildings so that residents won't self-evict. And this will create opportunities for some of our younger people. Then there's also housing that is being built. And when you receive government funding, we need to make sure that these projects have units that are at the 30%, 50%, and 80% of the area median income so that we can get residents in there that can afford to live.
Thank you. My next question, what concrete actions have you taken to support LGBTQ+ residents in Washington, D.C., and how do you intend to build upon those efforts if elected, outlining specific policy initiatives and community engagement strategies to advance LGBTQ+ rights, equity, and inclusion in our city?
One of the things that I've done as a commissioner is I've worked with Whitman Walker Health, who services LGBTQ community as well as other residents, but to make sure that this facility came online as quickly as possible. We know that access to affordable healthcare is very important, but access to healthcare that is also gender affirming and culturally relevant and sensitive is as equally as important for people's mental health as well as their physical health. So that's something I've done as a commissioner. I've also helped to activate and motivate people around the LGBTQ history legislation to make sure that that is documented and kept in the DC archives. What I would do is making sure that I could continue the relationship as a member of the Capital Stonewall Democrats to make sure that they're at the table when we're having discussion around policy, to also work with the mayor's office on LGBTQ affairs so that we can see what resources are available and if there are any gaps, how we can close some of those gaps. But I think that those conversations need to happen consistently. They shouldn't be once a year when budget season comes around or oversight season comes around. We should have those conversations consistently, and we can continuously have conversations around the budget all year long.
Thank you. I will open up to the audience for questions in just after my next question. So audience, if you have any, please put them in the chat. My next question for you, Celine. Public safety is the main issue, and we are witnessing sectors of our cities calling for more arrest of our youth to address juvenile crime. What is your plan on addressing juvenile crime?
Well, First, I would say that we got to deal with the issue of housing, as we discussed before. Just looking at the hierarchy of needs for people, if we can get stable housing for many of our young people, then I think we can address some of their other family needs. I remember a few years ago, there was a crisis and a scare of a lot of young people, especially young girls, being kidnapped or that have gone missing. Having worked with some of those families, many of those children were running away because they just were not feeling safe at home. So making sure that we can have children feel safe at home would be the first place to start. Then working with our schools to address chronic absenteeism and truancy, making sure that they can get into school. I'm a firm believer that if our children are attending school, then we will see less crime. We'll definitely see the crime drop. I also believe that we have to work with DYRS to improve its capacity on all levels. Many of our children are within that infrastructure, within that system, and we don't want them to be in there and still continue on with whatever brought them there. We want to see them be rehabilitated. So I believe making sure that we can improve those facilities will be a big thing. And the mayor introduced to us a couple of years ago what they call family centers in Ward 8. They're out there throughout the city, family success centers. We have at least 4 in Ward 8. And what they're supposed to be doing is to work with the family to help them address their needs as it pertains to being better parents, being better mothers, being better fathers. And I believe that if we can help with our parents and get them the resources that they need, that then in turn that will help our children. I do strongly believe, though, we do need to set a tone and make sure that our young people know that they just can't commit crimes. And so to that, I don't think that arresting them is the only solution or the way that we will get out of this, but we do need to make sure that they know that they will be held accountable.
Thank you. I have not seen any questions in the chat.
I'll ask one, Maxine, to give other people. What does being an ally or an advocate for the LGBTQIA community mean to you?
Being an ally is looking at how we can help the person from a holistic perspective. So one, you have to have foresight as leadership. That's why I would want to be talking to folks now to see what some of the issues are. You take office January 2nd at noon. I wouldn't want to wait till then. So I would definitely be in community with people, discussing these issues and and learning how we can advance what the causes are. I would want to look at the budget and see what are some of the things that we need to improve on, what are some of the things that need to be sustained, and what needs to be improved. I would want to look at what the Office of Human Rights has in terms of some of the gaps and some of the issues of discrimination that many of our community partners are facing, and seeing how we can close the gap in that area. But also, I think what is really important is making sure that people feel comfortable and know that they do have allies and support. So being present, being in these spaces, I think is also important.
I was texted another question, so I have one for you. Citing examples, please share the causes you have advocated for and how you have helped advance LGBTQ+ rights or otherwise helped foster a community of inclusivity for LGBTQ+ individuals and families.
Like I said earlier, working alongside Whitman Walker Health, making sure that this institution is at capacity. Power is handled at the institutional level. And if we don't have institutions that have power, then we don't have anything. So making sure that a healthcare facility in my ward, which I'm right around the corner from, was established is very important. Once again, working with Whitman Walker Health and Ballou High School to make sure that young people can be tested, and making sure that there are people who are gender affirming, who are sensitive to the various identities that we have, are present there so that young people can know what their statuses are. And also advocating on legislation for the history of LGBTQ DC residents to be documented in the DC archives.
Thank you. My next question, could you please describe a policy or goal that's part of your formal platform that benefits the LGBTQ+ community?
being that I'm a resident of Ward 8, and like I said, we have what I'm told we have the largest number of LGBTQ residents. I think that many of the things that I would want to do would be beneficial just by default. But I think specifically, one of the things that to me has stuck out after conversations with folks is making sure that we have housing for one, and that public safety in terms of preventing hate crimes would be too in this ward. We have a high number of domestic violence and sexual assault cases. And so I would want to make sure that we are addressing many of those things. So legislatively, making sure that penalties for victims of hate crimes is strictly enforced, as well as making sure that there are available places at the 801 East Men's Shelter for people who identify as LGBTQ are there.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughtful responses with us today, Celine. We are appreciative of your attendance to today's forum. We just wanted to make sure that you were aware of our 2 upcoming events. One is on May 21st with Capital Stonewall Democrats at the Bridge. The next one is May 30th with DC Young Democrats at Law Society.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly address the question in the chat from one of our former heads. We did not, we didn't get responses from the other 2 candidates. That happened with a few of the candidates who we reached out to. We made multiple attempts to get everyone to chime in tonight and to attend, and we just simply didn't hear back from the other 2 candidates. So that's why we don't know why they didn't participate in the forum. But I just wanted to share that. Sorry, Maxine. I guess we have one more candidate. So I'm going to go off mute and camera again and get that.
We are in our final round of candidate forums tonight. Again, thank you for sticking it out with me.
Our final candidate is having some issues with the camera and the link, so it's probably just going to be audio. So I apologize for that. But the candidate is here, so we're ready to move on whenever you are.
So next up, we are having our forum for candidates for US delegates. Unfortunately, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton could not join us this evening, but we do have Kelly Michael Williams, who will be joining us only on audio tonight. We welcome you, Kelly, tonight. You have 2 minutes to make your opening statement, and then I will jump into some questions for you. Oh.
Okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're still good. You still hear me? Because I'm trying to make sure everything is good.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I can see you now. Well, good evening. Thank you for having me, Stonewall Democrats. My name is Kelly Michael Williams. I am running for the delegate seat, DC delegate. I'm running for Congress. I have 25 years of experience at every level of government. I worked at the federal level in the White House, USDA, and I was the administrator of Farm Credit and secretary to the board. I've worked at state legislature in California, and I've also been on the served on the DC City Council. And currently, I am a ANC commissioner. I chair ANC 8E. Some of the things that I was able to accomplish in all those areas, federal level with USDA, I was able to allow or give access to $800 million to the Black farmers for school lunch programs, making sure that our young people who are in poverty and in poverty-stricken areas were able to have a good meal for lunch and at their schools, as well as at the state legislature. I was able to author legislation with my member to establish the motorcycle helmet law in California. Additionally, right here in DC, GED recipients prior to 2014 were not able to receive their high school diploma once they've completed their GED requirements. And with that information, we authored legislation under Councilmember Vincent Orange to be able to get that passed, and now GED recipients are able to get their high school diplomas. As an ANC commissioner, I've been advocating against slumlords and landlords who are mistreating or not providing adequate services and living quarters for tenants in my ANC and in my area. Moreoverly, I was homeless in the city with my son when he was 3 years old. We found out and discovered that there's no shelters or services for homeless single fathers. And that was something that was amazing to me, and didn't realize that that was the case, as well as taking care of my mother who had Alzheimer's for 13 years, being able to address Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid issues for her, and making sure that she had the quality of life that she needed until her passing earlier this year. So with that, I'm open to your questions. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our first question. States around this country, particularly in the South, are currently passing legislation that harms the LGBTQ+ community. As US Delegate representing Washington, D.C., how do you plan to ensure equal rights and protections for LGBTQ+ community, both at the federal and state levels?
Well, what I would look to do is to capitalize on the current legislation that's going through Congress now, HR 15, the Equity Act, Equality Act, and to make sure that with the passage of that legislation, we'll be able to ensure LGBTQ rights across the country, and being able to enhance that in other areas in housing and medical and healthcare treatment, education in school, as well as jobs, looking to make sure that LGBTQ issues as well, just the issues that our community, the community, LGBT community would have, can be addressed on a national level. I'm not going to be able to do a whole lot on the state side of things here in the district, but I can certainly make sure on the federal side that we can get that legislation passed with the addition of being able to take back the House in November, to be able to have that opportunity to make sure those rights are enshrined in legislation.
Thank you. I would like to know, what does it mean to be an ally or an advocate for the LGBTQ+ community mean to you?
What it means is being there for the constituents that need your assistance and your service, to make sure you advocate on their behalf, to support them in whatever area they need, whether it be, as I said, in housing, education, jobs. Being an advocate or ally for any group is being a workhorse, being a tyrant to make sure that the issues and concerns for your constituents are being met, whatever those issues are. For example, as I mentioned earlier in my opening, advocating for my tenants at a particular apartment building that I'm dealing with right now, having them stand outside in the middle of winter for 8 hours a day while their apartments are being renovated, and the landlord or the developer owner is telling them that that's not significant that's not significant renovations. Well, I had to go to the Attorney General to get the Attorney General involved, so that they would then mandate and make sure that they were enforcing the DC law that says significant renovations must have relocation dollars attached to this, so that those tenants can be relocated to apartments or hotels or wherever they need to be during those renovations. That's being an advocate for the community. That's being an advocate for your constituents. So that's what I did. So I would do the same thing for LGBTQ, for any population. All of DC is my constituency, so I will advocate for them vigorously, just like I would for my mother, as I did at Social Security or anywhere else, or my son when we were homeless.
Thank you so much. Again, just want to let the audience know, if you do have any questions for Kelly Michael Williams, please drop them in the chat. I do have another question for you. What concrete actions have you taken to support LGBTQ plus residents in Washington, D.C., and how do you intend to build upon those efforts if elected?
Well, currently I sit on the board of Covenant House. And so if you're familiar with Covenant House, we are the flagship for homeless youth 18 to 24. We provide full service wraparound services, emergency shelters. And most recently, in the last 2 years, we actually have started our initiated 2 LGBTQ emergency shelter units. And that was something that came about from our board and from the new leadership that we instilled at Covenant House back in 2019, just before the pandemic hit. And so some of the things that we've been doing is making sure that our LGBTQ residents are, one, they're safe and secure in housing. They're being able to provide with some healthcare, medical treatments. We're also providing wraparound services for mental health. We're also providing job readiness programming. We're providing educational opportunities through GED so they can get their high school diplomas for those who don't. And then we're also instilling opportunities for them to get outside work through our hospitality academy. So advocating for those programs and through that venue as a board member of Covenant House is the same thing I'll do as delegate in Congress. I'm going to advocate again for my constituents and making sure that they have everything they need, because I think that my primary responsibility, my primary job is to ensure the quality of life of my constituents, the quality of life of district residents, because as much as we do and anything that we do, we have to make sure that our residents' quality of life is at the utmost of the forefront of our thinking and what we're doing legislatively, socially, and politically. Everything is going to be in that category of how I'm going to think about things is the quality of life, because I'm going to treat everyone else like I treated my mother and like I did when I was raising my son. That's the type of leader that I'm going to have. I'm going to have some life experience that's going to keep me rooted and grounded in what needs to happen, so that everything I look at is going to be through those prisms of how was my mother cared for? How would I want her to be cared for? How was my son cared for? How would I want him to be cared for? Or my daughter, for that matter. So that's how I'm going to do, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you. I have another question for you. Republicans have openly shared how they plan on rolling back protections for women, LGBTQIA+, and people of color in Project 2025. If they win in November, they will begin implementing these plans as soon as January of 2025. How would you use your elected position to protect impacted communities, not only here in DC, but also those across the US who are increasingly facing legislative attacks and threats of violence?
I think what I'll do most is try to use my association and relationships with other state legislators and use that to work with my federal colleagues and being able to vigorously and effectively fight against it and block it, and really just call out the Republicans on their racist, attitudes and legislative proposals. I think we have to really stop being shy and afraid of calling the GOP out for everything that they try to do against LGBTQ, people of color, and every aspect of women's rights. We have to be vigorous and ferocious in calling it out and saying that, this is wrong. Call it out as being racist, which it is, and making sure that, for lack of a better word, we use the media to our advantage. The Republicans always use the media, and they somehow continuously are able to put a message together that Democrats don't have a response to. And I think this time around, with the new visions that is coming to Congress, that we'll be able to vigorously fight against that, using the media, using our pulpits across the various state legislatures that we do control, and being able to fight against it. And we just have to be able to do that. We cannot sit back. We cannot wait. We can't sit on our laurels. And we can't think that just because we say it's wrong, that people are going to accept it. We have to make sure they understand it. Something that Oye said earlier about going out and getting out to different states and talking to people and helping them understand how it's impacting them. If they take away LGBTQ rights, if they take away rights of people of color, if they take away women's rights, what other rights are they going to take away? So we have to make sure people understand that while they may be targeting us today, it will be you tomorrow. And therefore we have to make sure that we make that message clear to them so that they understand that their rights are next. We may be on a chopping block today, but you're on the menu tomorrow. So watch out, you might get eaten up.
Thank you. I want to move on to thinking about constituent services. So how do you plan on connecting DC residents with the rest of the Hill so that they can be impactful voices in the laws that are being written without us?
So one of the things that I really would like to do is have sort of a liaison or constituent service representative in each ward. I want to be able to make sure that we stay connected to all the wards, not just the ward that I live in, not just Capitol Hill or where we sit there. I want to make sure that we're able to touch all 8 wards and be consistently engaged in all 8 wards. So one of the things that I am certainly looking at how we will be able to structure is a constituent services individual in each ward, a community member that maybe be an ANC commissioner or maybe from a organization or group that will stay in contact with our office and be sort of a linchpin or an extension of our office in the community where my 1 or 2 constituent services persons on staff won't always be able to get to. I know as constituent service director for Vincent Orange, when he was at large, it's very difficult for me to get to all 8 wards. So what we did in our office is we identified where individuals on staff lived so that each person living in a different ward, wherever they live, they will be responsible for going to those meetings that I could not make. And so I would like to try to do something like that. Not just with staff, but trying to engage the community to make sure that we are always touching the community at all times. So that's something I'll try to look at doing or try to figure out how we structure to do, but certainly something that I will do.
Thank you. To the degree that you are able, will you commit to hiring at least 1 LGBTQIA+ staff member and/or intern?
Absolutely. I actually have LGBTQ on my campaign staff now. And when I ran previously, my campaign manager and communications director were both LGBTQ. So that is certainly in the wheelhouse of propositions to be able to do once we get in December.
Will you also commit to prioritizing hiring a person under 40?
Under 40?
Mhm.
Yeah, naturally. I mean, I don't know that I'll be able to ask their age, but certainly I will have a diversity in age and ethnicity and gender.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have one final question. We're going to jump into home rule. If I can find it again, give me 1 second. Okay. So there are countless recent examples of how the Republican Party continues to use the district and our residents as a bargaining chip on the Hill, and at great detriment to everyone who lives here. Trump has declared that he will make home rule and running back our rights, funding, and freedoms a top priority if he wins in November. How would you use your role to ensure this doesn't happen? What are you doing right now to ensure this doesn't happen?
I think what we would have to do is, again, the ability for us to stop that is one, we have to vote in November. I mean, it's basic bottom line. Democrats have to win in November. If Democrats don't win in November and not having the votes to be able to stop what the House could do or what Trump could do through executive order or anything else, we have to make sure that people understand across this country what that means. that he is taking away our autonomy, our ability to self-govern and to be able to have the ability that they have in their states and that their governor has and that their mayor has to be able to, write their own legislation, get it passed without any interference from Congress. We have to make that known to each and every person across this country. Right now, we have, I believe it's 56% of the nation supports DC statehood. And they will, and they say that, DC should be a state. And as I think Oye and Linda Gray said earlier, when you sit down and you're able to talk to people and help them understand why DC statehood is so important to us, our home rule is so important to us, and self-governing is so important to us, they get it and they understand it. No one else across this country would ever want to be taxed without having representation. And we have to make sure that we can identify and articulate that to them. So again, they see why and how it is affecting them and how it's effective to them. And it's not just a situation where we're just trying to do this and be able to have our senators or have our congressional members, but it's about being able to stand under the Constitution that we all say that we enjoy and we love. So therefore, having home rule and having self-governance is automatically and imperative that we're able to do that. So we just have to fight. We have to win in November, so that does not happen. And then if we aren't able to win in November, then we have to make sure we get it on the horn of every social media, every news outlet, and everywhere else, and just blast and talk about what it's doing to 700,000 Americans, and enforcing the fact that these are Americans here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much, Kelly McKell-Williams. It's been a pleasure talking to you this evening. Thank you again for coming out. We hope to see you at 2 of our upcoming events, one hosted by Capital Stonewall Democrats on May 21st at the Bridge, and the second one is hosted by the DC Young Democrats, which will be on May 30th at Law Society.
Sure will. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our candidates forum. Please make sure to cast your ballots for the Democratic primary by June 4th. And I'm going to turn it over to Howard.
Thank you so much, Maxine. You've done an amazing job tonight. Thank you so much for supporting and moderating the forums tonight. To all of our candidates, thank you again for joining us tonight, providing us with your platform and visions on how you're going to continue to make our city more equitable and how it will serve each and every one of us. And to our participants, thank you so much for joining with us. We appreciate you for joining in with us, listening to concerns and issues that matter to us most, and how our candidates are going to be able to be better of service to us constituents here in Washington, D.C. We have a couple announcements and reminders. The first announcement is the GLAA questionnaire has been released today. We will send those out to all of our members so they can help aid them in the endorsement process and making their endorsements or their decisions prior to May 20th, which is the cutoff for the endorsements. The second announcement that I want, or reminder that I would like to provide, is for Ward 7 candidates were unable to join us last week. So as their videos come in, we've requested them to send 3-minute videos to answer a couple of questions that matter to us most. As those videos come in, we'll be posting those to our social media outlets with their responses. We have received a couple, and if you go to our Twitter page, you will be able to see those questions and those responses. And as Maxine stated, May 21st, the Brig, next Tuesday, will be our endorsement party. We hope to have you join us at 7 p.m. along on May 30th with the DC Young Dems at Law Society at 6:30 will be our endorsement party as well. Finally, ballots for endorsements are due on May 20th. If you feel as if that you have been omitted and you should have received an endorsement ballot, please email Elizabeth Mitchell. She will provide her email in the chat. Please reach out to her to make sure that you are accounted for. And as a reminder, voting eligibility resets every year on January 1st. If you are a Capital Stonewall Dems member, you had to renew your membership prior to April 20th, 2024 to be eligible to vote in the current endorsement process. If you have any questions regarding that, more details can be found on our bylaws on our website. This concludes our endorsement forum for tonight. Again, thank you so much for joining, and we hope you have a wonderful night.